Good evening and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Hangouts. I am Jimmy Landley, the co-owner of Homeschool Network, and we are so happy to have you with us tonight. Homeschool Network is a group of about 100 excellent homeschool bloggers. We work to use social media to bring great content to the homeschool audience. You can watch this video tonight live on Google Plus or via YouTube, or if you miss it live, of course, you can watch it recorded, and we have this also converted to a podcast, so you can listen on iTunes or on Stitcher. Our Hangouts are at night, on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. We love to hear from you, so if you are watching live, please feel free to leave any comments or questions on the event page on Google+, and we will try to bring those into our discussion and have some of our brilliant panelists share their ideas with you. We hope that you will follow iHomeschool Network on Google+. Also follow our panelists. They'll be introducing themselves in just a moment. We'd love to have you subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all of our archives from our past Hangouts. And if you get our newsletter, you'll always be up to date with all of our projects and activities. I'm going to start by letting my production manager, Marlene Griffith, introduce herself.
Hi everyone, happy Thursday. My name is Marlene Griffith, and you can find me blogging over at adiligent.heart.com. I'm going to be bringing in your comments or questions from the event room tonight, so if you have any questions about our topic today, which is creative writing for homeschooling, just drop them in the event room and I'll pull them in for these awesome panelists that we have today.
Thank you, Marlene. It's always great to see you. Lauren, will you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I am Lauren from Ontario, Canada, and no, it's not snowing yet. But I have 4 children, 9, 7, 5, and 2, and I write over at servingfromhome.com just about our homeschool adventures and whatever recipes we're tackling in the kitchen and other stuff going on in our lives. And I'm really excited to talk with everyone about creative writing tonight because I used to hate writing, and now I'm writing, so it'll be a really good chat and hang out with you guys.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait to hear that story. And isn't everybody glad that we got to hear Lauren say about? Of course, she doesn't say it that way, but I want to count how many times she'll say that word tonight, so I can just love the way she says it. Jamie, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jamie, and you can find me at theunlikelyhomeschool.com, where I write about homeschooling organization, helps for the new homeschool mom, and just parenting, purposeful parenting from a faith perspective.
Thank you, Jamie. Jamie and Lauren and Brenda these ladies have amazing blogs. I want to encourage all of you to visit and subscribe. They have fantastic content. Brenda is our last panelist to introduce herself.
Yes, hi, I'm Brenda from Schooling a Monkey, and I have 2 little girls. And over at Schooling a Monkey, we talk about all sorts of things, but one of my favorite things to communicate to homeschooling moms is just how easy and simple things can be. So that's kind of what we try to stress at Schooling a Monkey, that it doesn't have to be difficult. But creative writing is one of my favorite things of all time. I was not the child that hated creative writing. I love it. So I'm really excited to hear from Lauren about how it's the different perspective of coming to writing from a non-writing perspective. So I'm excited to talk to all these ladies and hear your questions tonight.
Great. Brenda, it's great to have you on the panel. Brenda's becoming one of our regulars here in our iHomeschool Hangouts. And I just found out tonight that Brenda was homeschooled all the way through her own education. So she brings a really unique perspective, and Lauren was too. So we have second-generation homeschoolers on the panel, which is quite fascinating. So yeah, our topic tonight is creative writing. And what we mean by that is writing stories, writing maybe poetry, something that's not expository or persuasive. And we think of school academic writing, we think of the essay, the expository essay where you're explaining something, maybe comparison contrast, or a persuasive essay. And tonight we're going to be talking about creative writing. So my first question is, why should we encourage our kids to even do creative writing? I mean, aren't essays and research papers way more important than creative writing? Why should we let kids write short stories, waste their time? So I would like to hear from the moms as to why is creative writing even on the menu when we talk about homeschooling? Lauren, I'd like to hear your opinion first.
Um, Growing up homeschooled, it was good, and my mom tried a lot to get us into writing, and my sister was much more naturally the writer, so it was easier to for her to take all the excitement for getting the writing assignments done. And I think a big part of it is reading and comprehension and exploring and reading first and having that as a basis. But creative writing, I think, encourages expression and just encourages kids to even talk differently themselves. The way that they relate to other people and the way that they express themselves can start in writing. So I think it really helps to develop character as well. As someone who didn't enjoy writing, now enjoying it and seeing my kids enjoying it as well, I can understand some of the reasons why you want to encourage it, especially from a young age, even from a non-writing age, which I'm sure we'll get to talking about later on. But different forms of writing as well are good to really stretch your abilities and to grow for sure.
Okay, thanks for that perspective. And yeah, definitely let's talk about, I'm going to make a note about how do you write with kids who don't write, right? Pre-writers is what we call those. And so, yeah, we'll definitely address that. So, Jamie, why do you think we should encourage kids to even study creative writing or engage in it?
Well, I think I have two answers for that. One, my general all-purpose answer that I think applies to everybody is just that a lot of times we think of these right-brain creative types that, or should I say, anything that we do creatively. I think we want to categorize that as a right-brain thing, and we think, oh, my child isn't a right-brained person, but I think it really plays into the whole child when we do something creatively, whether writing or art or whatever, because anytime you do anything creative, yes, there's the creative side, but you're also playing into the left side of your brain too. You're having to do a lot of cognitive thinking in organizing your thoughts, in planning out what you're going to write, choosing purposeful words. So I think you're using both sides of the brain, and so anytime you use the creative side, you're also exercising the left side of the brain also. And I think we need to really embrace that and embrace the idea of educating the whole child. And part of that is to provide opportunities for creative skills, including creative writing. So that's my sort of general all-purpose answer. I also have a personal answer that I think might resonate to other moms who teach multiple ages. I have a middle schooler all the way down to a 2-year-old, and other than the 2-year-old, we all sit down to do creative writing every week. And I guess I'll just use my two oldest for this example. I have two older children, and at their age, some of their natural passions and gifts are already starting to become very evident. And my daughter is a natural writer and always has been. She sees the world through the written word. Black and white words is how she colors her days. My son, on the other hand, he's an artist, and he'll admit, Mom, reading and writing, they're not my favorite things. It doesn't come as naturally to him. So we do creative writing, obviously, for my daughter's sake, to just cultivate that love in her and that passion and provide opportunity to just encourage that in her and make that better. But my son still has to sit down with us every week and do creative writing, if for no other reason than to think outside of himself and, like Scripture says, to consider the interest of others ahead of my own. And it's an opportunity, I tell him, to kind of say to her, I value this because I value you. And so from a personal perspective, we do it because it encourages relationships in our home and builds character.
Wow, you got deep on us there, Jamie. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you for sharing that. Everything can be character development, can't it? Brenda, what are your thoughts on why kids need to learn to write creatively?
Well, I think the other moms have covered the basics, but I think for me personally, the reason that I think creative writing is so important is that it's really a skill that you use everywhere. You use it when you grow up in business. There's a lot of creative thinking, even in like abstract math concepts. I think it just builds a foundation of thinking in different ways and opening up your mind to expression and communication, and every aspect of being able to write well and speak well is something that really helps you later on as an adult and as you're growing up to really understand yourself and to understand others. And I think that's probably my biggest reason for promoting creative writing, for even for kids who don't enjoy it that much.
So what you're saying there then is that creative writing just fosters creativity in general.
It definitely does. It definitely does,
Okay.
and it sets a foundation for opening your mind to creativity in other areas that you wouldn't expect.
It's kind of like when kids say, why should I study algebra? We tell them, well, it's just kind of exercise for your brain, even if you never use it in life. And I never do. It's just exercise for your brain, and it's good for your brain. And so, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. One thing I wanted to point out, Jamie, you said, you talked about right brain tasks and how we tend to categorize, this is a right brain and this is left brain. And I like how you brought out that really most learning tasks are both sides, that it takes both, and that's good. Do you think that our society in general doesn't value right-brained skills and work as much as left-brained?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak to society, but I think generally in education, you're either academic or you're not. And that's a shame because we have, there are just, well, smart comes in many different forms, I'll say that. And I can look at my son and think, well, he doesn't really like to read or he doesn't really like to write, so I guess he's not very smart. And that's not true. He's very smart. And his smart comes out in different forms, and for him it comes out creatively. And so I think it's a shame, but it is, I think, the norm that in education across the board we tend to look at you're either academic or you're not.
Mm-hmm. I've found, because I have a very right-brained artistic daughter too, and I've found that it's not valued in the same way that we value something like math and science prowess. People value it in that they look at it and go, whoa, that's amazing. But there's not the value of, oh, she's going to really go somewhere in life. It's just, wow, she can do something I can't do. So I do think there is a somewhat of a prejudice. People think it's kind of a magical talent if you can write creatively or draw or do some of these more right brain tasks. And I appreciate what you guys said about boosting creativity and using both sides of your brain. Now, I'm sure none of you are saying that you would throw out essay writing and research writing in favor of creative writing, right? We're talking about a whole comprehensive view of all things writing. Yeah, you guys are nodding.
I think it's, they're kind of two different skill levels, but one certainly plays into the other. I think if you can learn great technical writing, grammar mechanics, all of those things, it's obviously only going to help you when you sit down to creatively write. You still need to know how to properly write dialogue and how to properly start a paragraph and formulate your thoughts in a progressive way. All of those skills sort of transfer over one from the other.
Absolutely, and we know that good expository writing includes elements of creative writing. And that makes your expository writing more rich, more interesting, more vivid, and so they definitely can feed into each other. So you said something about levels, so I'm going to skip to the question about when do you start teaching creative writing? And in this, we can discuss pre-writers, kids who aren't really writing yet. And do kids outgrow it? I mean, is there? I know some people kind of have an idea of we're going to do kind of writing silly stories when kids are young, and then we're going to transition them into more serious academic writing as they get older and drop the creative writing. Is that a natural progression, Lauren, or do you think that we can do creative writing all the way through?
I think there does need to be a change in focus much later in the grades when needing to write technical papers and essays is going to be much more of a requirement for your education. But I think as an outlet and as a form of just continuing to grow, that you do need to still encourage the creative writing. That may look something like starting a blog or writing for a newspaper, starting up a newspaper with your school-age friends, or just keeping a diary or a journal or something. Or something that I've really been stretched in and challenged in lately is when you're doing your Bible study, journaling creatively through that, through art, through writing words. And then, of course, there's lots of raps and other cool songs and ways that you can put expression in if you're musically inclined as well. So I really think that it's important to continue it on. Obviously, it needs to take a little bit more of a backseat if it's going to just take away from the time you're going to need to spend on the other things. But as far as when to start, we started as soon as our kids were able to write, actually writing, but I think that it goes a little bit further back than that, and it's creating an interest in them in creative stories, in different types of writing, so reading and memorizing poetry. I'm not huge on poetry, but there are some really fun poems out there, getting them to learn how to write poetry, and there's lots of curriculum, there's lots of ideas online for that if you really don't know where to start. Reading Winnie the Pooh, I think it's the House at Pooh Corner, and a couple of other ones to the really young ones. They love it. I kind of am a little bit bored, but they really like it. And then for younger ones, and I believe this one was on Jamie said she had, and I'll let her talk more about it, but just using other things to get them to express themselves verbally, not necessarily writing it down, but just starting that foundation of verbal expression of creativity, or drawing a picture, however it looks. Even if they can't write, anyone can draw a picture. Don't tell them what it is. Ask them to tell you what it is so that you don't make them feel bad if you didn't interpret it correctly. However, there's plenty of ways to include the younger ones, and we've really only just kind of started doing that now with our third. The boys, I waited until they were writing age, and I'm wishing that we had started sooner, but they're doing fairly well either way, so it works out.
Oh, those were great tips. Yeah, about story writing and it's telling stories orally. I mean, that's what creative writing is. A great tip there. Brenda, Jamie?
Well, I would just kind of echo what she said, that as soon as, in my opinion anyway, as soon as a child can talk, he or she can write a story. They just do it verbally. And so it's my job as the mom to write it down for them so they can dictate to me their story. I remember when my daughter was 2.5 and she's in middle school now, I remember one Christmas sitting down with her and I said, I want you to tell me the Christmas story in your own words, and we're going to make a book. And so she told me the story in her own words. I wrote it down exactly as she said it, all the ums and the ands and, verbal clutter. And I typed it out for her and left places for her to illustrate the story in her 2-year-old way. And we still have that. I had it comb bound at Office Max. And she wrote the Christmas story for me. So I think as soon as your kids can talk, as long as you allow for time to actually write out what they're saying, they can do creative writing, and you're already lighting that fire for them early on. And I think that's one of the reasons she loves to write, is right away, as soon as she learned to talk, we were on it.
So maybe we should use the word compose. She's composing a story instead of saying write, because that does confuse people. I know what you mean when you say she wrote a story, but a lot of people think write means you are holding a utensil in your hand, and we mean compose, create.
Well, and if
So
you think about it, there's authors throughout time that never actually wrote any of their own story. They dictated it to somebody to write it down for them.
good point. And had an editor and then a designer to do the layout. Exactly. The point is the idea, not the
Right.
words on the page. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Brenda.
Well, one thing that I like to do in the preschool age, my daughter is almost 2. She's not quite ready for actually telling me a story. She only knows like 5 words. But we like to do a lot of reading aloud to her, just exposing her to the world of creative thinking. I know my older daughter reads to her all the time, which is really fun. I think that definitely helps the younger siblings to see the older ones interested in writing and reading and every sort of creative outlet. But one of the things that we did whenever my older daughter was a little bit younger, before she was in school, we did a lot of rhyming stuff. So that was always really fun. The younger kids really enjoy coming up with different rhyming words, and they think it's hilarious too, which is really fun. And they don't realize that they're learning creative thinking or vocabulary or anything like that. That's a fun way that even the youngest of kids can experience creative writing in their own way.
Well, you know, a great thing they would love is a rhyming dictionary. I had a rhyming dictionary when I was a kid, and I thought it was the most fun thing. And yeah, exactly. What is it about kids and words that rhyme? And but a rhyming dictionary is so much fun. And I got one for my daughter, and she loved it too. And it was fun. And when it would come up to writing poetry, you know, you can just look and see the rhyming words and make a silly little limerick or something. And that was really fun. So that's a tip I would have, is get a rhyming dictionary and add that to your writing resource shelf. Oh, another thing I remember, you jogged my memory, Lauren, when you were talking about storytelling, was my daughter, we had this thing when she was little. It was a story wheel, and it actually had, like, I think, locations on the outside, pictures, and then it had maybe people, and then maybe things, or transportation or something, but it was a wheel, and you could make one of these. And I always thought that we would make one of our own, but we had this one that someone had given us, and you would turn. It was 3 separate wheels, you know, concentric wheels with like a brad in the middle, and you would turn them, and then, you know, you tell a story. So it's this person and this place and this, you know, transportation or something, and we would put that in our bag. And we traveled a lot when she was little, and so we'd pull that out and tell stories. And that's a great way to compose, you know, do the creative writing. And you're getting in those elements of literature where you're, you know, character and setting, and then a conflict and how you resolve it. So like you were saying, Jamie, it's multifaceted. And those kind of little, that would be a great school project, to make those kind of things. Like, you could do index cards with pictures, and you draw one from this and one from this and one from this and make a story. So those kind of things are fun. What are you saying, Lauren, about Scholastic Story Starters? What's that?
On the Scholastic site, they have something called Story Starters, and it's a fun ship, I believe, and you pull the spin wheel, and then it gives you 4 options with 4 slightly random things that you have to weave into a creative story. And then I also just remembered something else which flew out of my head. So if I remember it again, I'll bring it up on the page or something. But I found that, and I thought that was really interesting, because then that saves Mom having to scramble around and come up with ideas if she's not quite at the point of having it organized yet, and the kids can jump on there and do it themselves.
Jamie, I think I've seen you do something like that on your blog, where maybe you gave the kids a bag of objects. Am I imagining that, or is that?
Yeah, we do a lot of story starters. That's one of my favorite ways to introduce creative writing, because most kids can sort of weave together thoughts, but that first initial thought is the hardest part. And yeah, one time I just threw a bunch of random things into a bag, and I said, I want you to draw out 3 things, and you have to incorporate those 3 things in your story. And they all kind of ended up drawing the same things out of the bag, and yet their stories were so different because it really reflected their personality. We've done other things too. We live up in the tundra where it's freezing pretty much 9 months out of the year, and last year we had an eternal winter. So in the middle of the winter, I just flipped on some Hawaiian music on Spotify, and I said, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to dream about this sunny summer vacation we're going to take, and picture it in your head. And we just wrote from that song. Or even just cutting out pictures from a magazine, some picture that has a lot of action and emotion or color, that can really strike some inspiration. We do a lot of story starters. There's a, oh, I can't think of the name of it. It's a packet that you can get on Amazon. It's just like a little tiny booklet that it's a flip book, and it has all kinds of story starters that either you can use or it will maybe strike some inspiration for you as a mom to think of your own story starter. We've used picture books that don't have any words in them, and we've looked at all the pictures, and I said, I want you to come up with your own story, even if it's just one of the pictures in the book. I want you to take this one picture and add the words to it. So there's all kinds of things that you probably have around your own house. You don't have to invest in a ton of extracurricular things. There's websites online that are free that really you're just wanting to spark the inspiration to get a creative writing situation going.
That's a great point. You know, getting started in anything is always the hardest part, isn't it? And once you get started, that momentum keeps you going. But I mean, it's true with cooking dinner, cleaning the bathroom, writing a blog post, planning your homeschool lessons, anything. So true. So that story starter just kind of gets them over the hump there. Brenda, what did you want to share?
Yeah, everybody talking about stories reminded me of a memory that I had quite forgotten about until just now. But when we were kids, we liked to do the one-line stories, where like everybody would say one sentence and then the next, and leave it on like a cliffhanger, and then the next person would say the next thing that happened in the story and then keep it going. Actually, after I moved away, because I'm a lot older than my younger siblings, we actually wrote a story online and like an email list between me and my siblings after I had moved away that was a similar prompt like that, and it was really fun to keep that story going for so long. But it's easier if you only have to come up with like a sentence or a paragraph in the story as opposed to the whole thing yourself.
Yeah, that's fun. That's a really fun idea. So we're getting into some practical teaching tips, so let's just keep that going. So let's talk about more ways to teach creative writing. Just throw out any other ideas you have. I have one I'm going to throw out, and that is writing workshops or co-op writing. I did a peer editing workshop. We'd met monthly, and this was for middle schoolers when my daughter was in middle school, and we just had kids that were like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and we met once a week. Now, our focus really was more on essays and expository writing, but sometimes we would do some creative writing, and that was one of the things we did, Brenda, was that activity where people would add, you know, you would write maybe for 3 minutes, and then you would stop and pass your paper to the next person, and they would keep writing, and it got pretty silly, but those are some fun activities for writing, and the incentive for the kids was they knew someone was going to read their writing, a peer was going to be reading their writing, and so the stakes were a lot higher for them. And a lot of the parents would say, oh my goodness, I couldn't get my kid to write until you organized this writing, this peer editing workshop, because now they know, you know, they didn't care about my reading it, but now they care about their peers reading it, and they don't want to look like a dummy, so they are really investing, and it was a great opportunity for the kids to hone their writing. So that's my offering. So what else do you guys have to share in terms of teaching the creative writing, teaching tips?
Well, I'll just piggyback on your what did you call it, peer editing for a second. If you don't happen to have a co-op that you're participating in or a peer editing, you can still do that sort of thing and have that positive peer pressure on your kids to do their very best. We do writers workshops no matter what kind of writing we're doing, and some of that is just we call up grandma and read the story to her, or the neighbor across the street, or my daughter is working on a writing project where she has to write an editorial, which is a technical writing, but she's giving her opinion about something, and I said, we're going to submit this to the newspaper, by the way, so it has to be your very best. And so we live in a small town and we can submit things to the newspaper often, but we take advantage of that, and just knowing that it's going to be published somewhere puts that little extra incentive to do the very best.
That's a great idea. And even if you have a big newspaper, they're probably, the cute factor of a kid submitting something is probably going to go a long way, at least the first time. So I'm thinking that would work, definitely. Other ideas for writing?
I have a couple more. I don't want to occupy the whole time. One of the things that I remember doing as a little girl in first grade, and I still have mine and I've kept it, and now I do it with my kids, is squiggles. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of those, but I have it. I brought it. This is my squiggle book from first grade. So all it is you draw as the mom something, some weird little shape in permanent marker somewhere on the page, and you hand this to them. And for my 5 kids, of course, I would write the same illustration on 4 different notebooks, but maybe put it in a different spot each time, or they can turn the book in various ways, but they have to somehow make a picture out of my little squiggle that I've made, and then write a story about it. So that's just a cheap, easy way to provide some creative, jump start. And the other thing that we've done and my kids love is I've just taken a little mason jar and cut out little strips of scrapbook paper, and on each strip I've either written a story starter or maybe a couple of random words, or maybe the start of a real book that actually is a real book that they've read, but it's just the first couple sentences, and I put them in the jar. And then, anytime we get the notion, which for us is once a week, to do creative writing, they just pull one of the little slips out and read it aloud, and they love to be the person who gets to read the slip. And that's just, again, another jump start to igniting some creativity when you're writing.
Yeah, Brenda, go ahead.
Well, I like to keep things simple, obviously. So my favorite way to encourage creative writing is just to give children a little block of time and let them write anything. So any sort of writing, if they want to write like in huge letters or tiny letters, or if they want to write the alphabet over and over again, if they can't think of an idea, just to get them used to writing something down on the page in a written form. And I feel like that's extremely helpful when you've got the children who are perhaps a little more hesitant or don't know what to write, just letting them know that they have the freedom to literally write anything they can think of. One time my daughter copied a warning label, which always amused me. But sometimes it's just that freedom to realize that you don't have to worry about the rules when you're doing creative writing, that it's just literally putting your thoughts and ideas down on a page in any way that appeals to you. Sometimes like maybe writing in a spiral pattern, or doing like those hidden messages where it's like writing in code. That's always a fun way for some kids, but just letting them have fun and just be free with it in any way they can think of.
We've used more recently daily writing prompts or journal entries that have been helpful, and it's quick and easy for me if I'm not quite ready to work with them, just to have them go sit and write down a journal entry. But also writing prompts that are online. There are tons of them, and I put my Pinterest board up in the hangout live page, and I put a number of the ones there, but the one that we use the most is from Write Shop, and they have every Wednesday they have a writing prompt, and they have some really fun, cool ideas that the kids are always crowding over the iPad to try and read them and pick the one that they want to write about. So that's more for the boys that are really into the writing. Our co-op group has some amazing writing classes that we do, but we do use, a lot of the time, we use other curriculum. So we haven't used Write Shop, but we have used Institute for Excellence in Writing, which is really, really well done. And it does start off on the lower end. It starts off with a lot more creative writing, and then it gets into a little more advanced things as you go along. So it kind of progresses with the ages. Another one that's really fun that we're doing for a second time around with the same group of kids is Written and Illustrated. And what Written and Illustrated does is it takes the kids through the process of making a book. Everything from the very beginning stages of doing the research, doing, like, very simple because this is like grade 4 and under, doing their cover page, doing their editor, whoever the editor was, which would be mom, when it was written, all of that technical stuff, and then right into actually writing the story, doing the initial draft, the rough draft, the final draft with all the drawings and everything. And it's amazing because by the end they have this book that they've worked on for about 8 weeks, once a week, and it's just fantastic. And they're so excited and thrilled about having poured all of this work into this really cool book that they have. That's written and illustrated by themselves. So that is one I really highly recommend. I'm not sure if it's a book or if it's a full curriculum or anything, but I think it's just a like a manual that takes you through the process.
What is that
of how
called
to teach
again?
it. Written and illustrated.
Okay. Maybe
Yeah, it might
can
be.
hunt that down.
Yeah, it might be an older one, but I'm sure that they've kept it updated because it is really, really quite good.
And I would say for really young kids, start out with something not very intimidating, like just a mini book. I'm going to show you guys real simple how to make a mini book. So like here's just a plain piece of paper. You can make a really simple book, and you fold it into eighths. You know, you fold it in half, half, half. And I just marked it so you can see it on the video, but you don't actually have to mark it. But this section right here in the middle, you're going to cut it. Tutorial time. And then you open it up like this, and you smush it. And then you end up with a little 4-page book. 1, 2, and my light's not so good. 2, 3, 4. So, you know, you have 8 sides. So, ooh, isn't that cool? So that's a 1-page book. I mean, it's tiny, so if you use bigger paper, obviously it'd be bigger. And we made tons of these. Yeah, I know, Brenda. We made tons of these with my kid because it's not intimidating, right? So you have a title or cover, and you've got, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then, you know, made by so-and-so. And it's so small that it's not intimidating to a kid. And so this is a great way to start with bookmaking. But yeah, I actually like bigger paper, so then the pages are a little bigger. But it works. And so it's a 1-page mini book. I'll try to find some directions and put it on the event page.
I always like to use TOPS has these primary handwriting and sketch journals, and for really young kids to be able to have a place for the illustration, and then the actual lines are those primary lines, which makes it a little bit more user-friendly for them. But when we do these, we keep a running notebook through the whole year, and actually for several years. My daughter just finished one from 5th grade that she started in preschool. And so because we keep the same journal from time to time, then they're able to go back and read the stories that they wrote in preschool and see how far they've come, and really get encouraged that, hey, I really am getting better, and my stories are getting better. And I think it puts a lot of value to their story that it's saved in one spot, and it's sort of this all-in-one book.
Marlene, can you bring in that question that Heather asked about a kid who's allergic to pencils? Do you see that?
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
It
Yeah, it's really cute. Lauren and Heather hopped are kind of talking out there on the event page, so I wanted to give Lauren a chance to say it on the video. Heather says, how do you, oh, Lauren, I'm sorry, Marlene, you read it. I apologize.
No, that's okay. So Heather's asking, how do you encourage wiggly boys who are allergic to pencils in their creative writing pursuits?
Lauren, go ahead and tell her what you said on the event page, and feel free to elaborate.
I said I have one of those. I have the one who spells does his spelling words and his math problems, his multiplication tables upside down on the couch and jumping around the room. Very kinesthetic learner. He's gotten better with I wouldn't say he was ever allergic to pencils, but he does eat them, chews the ends. But not swallow, but he does chew on them. So I said that I let him stand for creative writing, or for any writing that's not having to be necessarily graded or checked, just because I don't want to stifle his creativity, and I don't want him to feel like it has to be absolutely perfect. The other thing I should have mentioned earlier when we do the journal entries or anything else is I don't correct their spelling or grammar or punctuation on creative writing, because I don't want them to feel like they have to measure up to this standard. I want them to express themselves and be free to do that. They're going to get the other stuff in their school lessons. So if I let him stand, it helps. And we've also been using a really good handwriting program that has helped him to become proud of his handwriting and to want to do a better job. So that has helped him to sort of see that he can write nicely and he likes what he's writing. But I would also say maybe if you can teach them to keyboard and to type it on the computer, maybe that would be a bit more of an interest to him than having to sit and give him the option once in a while. If he does it a couple times in his notebook, then he can do it on the computer the next time or something like that.
I think that's key for a kid who hates the pencil, the actual physical task of writing. You just have to separate composition from the act of writing because they're totally different, and give that child other ways of getting those ideas down on paper that don't involve him pushing a pencil. Now, obviously, at some point he's going to have to push a pencil, but composition is not the same as handwriting. So, two different tasks. So, ladies, we're getting close to the end. We're not totally done, but I wanted to give you guys one last chance to say anything you didn't have a chance to say, and if you have other ideas about the link between reading and writing, how is reading linked to creative writing or writing in general, vocabulary, and any other tips for reluctant writers, this is your time to share them. So these are kind of going to be your final words. So Brenda, Schooling a Monkey, I want you to give us your final thoughts here, anything you want to wrap up with.
Well, I am a professional writer as sort of my side job, so I definitely believe that the bridge between reading and writing is extremely important. I was always a reader growing up, and I really think that influenced what I became as an adult. But whenever I was growing up, I would always have people say, "Where on earth did you learn those words?" Because I always read all these really old classic books that had vocabulary that kids don't really learn today if they're not really reading. So I think that reading and then creative writing too helps you learn a better way to communicate, and you can bring your point across clearer in creative outlets and in professional and nonfiction sort of aspects. So I really feel like that reading and writing and creative writing are particularly important skills to continue to foster as a child gets older. Even if they seem like they're more peripheral, they're really, in my opinion, one of the more important subjects to focus on.
Thank you, Brenda. Lauren?
Agreed, definitely on the connection between reading and expressing oneself through writing. I've noticed too, understanding what you're reading and having them tell back to you, or focusing a lot on the comprehension of what they're reading and retelling it to you helps them to express themselves better in writing. We kind of slacked off a little bit at the beginning of our homeschooling with the comprehension part of reading, and we just read. But I wouldn't stop and do, I think it's the Charlotte Mason method that stops every so often that has the kids do a dictation back. And I think that's really important just for them to reiterate back to you that they're making the connections. They picked up a lot, they learned a lot, but I think we've had a little bit more of a struggle in, it really encourages stopping and thinking about what you're reading, which then translates into when you're writing, being able to stop and think about what you're writing and how you're writing it. So there's definitely a huge connection between encouraging the depth of reading and the comprehension of it and your writing.
All right, Jamie, it's you.
Well, I just wanted to echo what Lauren said earlier. We kind of passed over it about not correcting creative writing. If the purpose for creative writing is really to draw out that creativity in your kids, taking out that red pen and marking up their work is really going to squelch that fast. I think there's a time and a place to do that. And when we're sitting down for creative writing, it's not that I just let all those mistakes go. I make a mental note of them. And if I see a spelling error, I add that spelling word to their spelling list that week. But I don't need to point the finger at them and circle it in red. It's really just going to negate anything that I'm trying to do with inspiring in creativity within them. And the other thought that I wanted to just share, if you have a struggling writer, I think one of the key things to doing anything in school that somebody hates doing is just really playing into their passions. For my son, who, Mom, writing's not my favorite thing, I really have to present creative writing in the way that he thinks. And he thinks through pictures, he thinks through color. And so I usually allow him to make the illustration first. And he's able to process the thoughts of his story and to plan and organize it as he's drawing the picture. And so then when it's time to sit down and actually write the story's kind of already written for him. He just has to add the black and white word to the page. And so I think if you can really play into your child's passion, maybe they don't really like writing long narrative dramas. Maybe they'd rather write a pretend newspaper, or maybe they'd rather write a letter to an imaginary friend, or there's various different things that you can do, that it doesn't have to be, oh, I thought of one. Just 2 weeks ago, we kind of combined creative writing with art, and we ended up making comic books together. And so those who like to draw were drawing all kinds of pictures and maybe only had a few words in their comic book. And for those who like to write, there was all kinds of words and very few pictures, but it worked out. And I was able to play into each of their passions that way. So I think if you have a struggling writer, you really maybe just have to think outside the box and play into their passions and the way that writing comes naturally for them.
That's so true. I know my daughter went through a phase where every single writing assignment had something to do with cats. And I just let it go. It didn't matter, as long as you were writing, that was fine. It did not matter. And so the subject doesn't necessarily matter as long as they're writing. So keeping their interests or capitalizing on their interests is really important. Well, ladies, Brenda, Jamie, Lauren, thank you so much for all the great ideas. I mean, there have been a ton of ideas. Marlene, haven't you just been blown away by all the ideas? Yeah, like I'm ready to go out and do some writing myself. I'm so motivated. So thank you guys for spending an hour of your time with us tonight and for sharing with the homeschool community all these great tips. I want to encourage all of our authors to go to Lauren's blog, servingfromhome.com. Jamie is at unlikelyhomeschool.com. Is that right?
TheUnlikelyHomeschool.com. Yep.
TheUnlikelyHomeschool.com. And then Brenda is at schoolingamonkey.com. Yes? Okay, great. So, and Marlene, you can find her at adiligentheart.com. And I hope that you'll look up these ladies and subscribe to their blogs and interact with them. We are wrapping up our hangout, and we are just so happy you've been with us. And remember that we'll be back next week. Next week, November 13th, we're going to be talking about teaching vocabulary for homeschool, and we're going to be talking about all levels from little kids on up into high school. And then we're going to have November 20th, we're going to talk about single-parent homeschooling. In December, of course, we'll take a break for Thanksgiving, and then in December, we're going to have special guest Kendra Fletcher talking about keeping homeschool real. We're going to be getting rid of those facades, and we're going to be getting real. And then our last hangout for the year is going to be on December 11th, where we have another special guest. My good friend Kim Vidge will be talking to us about ethnic and multicultural studies for homeschool. So I hope that you can join us. If you're listening to this, in 2015, just know that everything I just said, all those topics, are on our YouTube archives. So you can go to YouTube and search for iHomeschool Network, and you can find those topics I just mentioned, as well as all of our former Hangout topics. We've been doing this for about 1.5 years, so there's quite a collection now of resources. So please enjoy those free resources on our YouTube channel. It's been great spending the night with you guys, and we'll see you again next week at iHomeschool Hangouts. Bye for now.